And so in this session, we want to unpack this concept of leadership coaching and embracing grit and resilience. Why does this matter? Well, 2020 really helps us understand why we need to have a session like this, leadership coaching, embracing grit and resilience. I call it the popping peas of 2020. That pandemic pivots, protests, and politics. That's really the storyline of 2020. Pandemic pivots, protests, and politics. There's no such thing as life-work balance. Everything was out of balance in 2020. It's such a thing as life-work rhythm. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later. So this is why this is important, because we need grit, we need resilience when we're going through adversity, when we're going through difficulty, when we're off center. One of my habits, I love going into the woods and I journal oftentimes what the Spirit of God is prompting or putting on my heart. One of the things I journaled that God allows the hard stuff in life to become some of your great stuff, okay? And it becomes best stuff to serve the world. Let me say that again, that God allows and he uses the hard stuff. 2020 was a hard year, but we've had hard times even before 2020. But God allows the hard stuff to become some of the great stuff in your life, in my life. And it becomes the best stuff to serve other people. And so leadership coaching and a leader's life, and by leader, we're talking about a person of positive influence and a person who serves, who leaves others better off than how they found them. And with coaching, which is so different from counseling, of course, they have some similarities. But counseling, looking into the rear view mirror, looking at your past and trying to figure out through cognitive therapy, perhaps how do I process, how do I turn the page on situations in my past? Coaching is looking through the front windshield. Where am I going? What's the destination? And so Proverbs 20 verse 5 says that there's deep waters in the heart of a leader. And it takes wisdom to extract, wisdom to bring it to the surface, to bring high definition clarity. And that's what I do. That's what I think of when I think of leadership and leadership coaching in particular. Let's go a little further and talk about leadership. The other pieces that we'll talk about, we'll unpack how does grit, and we'll define grit, we'll define resilience, and how do they play a role in terms of the coaching, and how does a leader embrace it. And then I'll introduce you to a tool I created towards the latter end of 2020 called RISE, which is an acronym: Robust, Impact, Seek, and Effect. And we'll talk about that and unpack that as well. When we talk about leadership coaching and talking about why grit and why resilience matters for a leader, in my Turn the Page book, I have a metaphor that I use. It's called front stage, backstage. So the front stage of every leader's life is their public world. The backstage in a leader's life is their private world. The scriptures would say it this way: man looks at the outward appearance, the front stage. God looks at the heart, the backstage. Proverbs 4:23 says, attend to your heart. Guard your heart. How? With all diligence. Backstage, for out of it flow the issues of life. On the front stage. So you see how this works, it's dynamic. And so the front stage is external. The backstage is internal. In order to have external success is based on internal health. So what happens on the front stage of a leader's life? Several things happen. On the front stage in a leader's life, there's strategy. There's the need for technology. There's work. There's productivity in a business, for-profit business. There's profitability. All of this is the external world of a leader, and it matters. It definitely matters, this front stage of a leader's life. The backstage is really the place that we do our deepest work, the work of heart, along with God's Spirit in a leader's life. And so in the backstage, I encourage leaders to embrace and work with them through this acrostic and acronym STORY, STORY. So what's happening in the backstage, and these concepts and what happens here in the backstage through the acronym STORY is really universal. So the S in a leader story, because what's happening in a leader, the greatest gift that a leader can give themselves, can give the world, can give their families, can give their teams, can give their organizations is a healthy, focused self. I say to leaders all the time, it takes a healthy me to build a strong we. That as I'm healthy on the backstage, it governs how I show up on the front stage. Will I show up from love, or will I show up for love? Will I show up seeking validation and significance, or will I show up serving and leaving others better off? So the S in story is the leader's soul. The leader's soul. And with this, it's the deepest part of a leader. It's the deepest part of a leader. And here it's important that a leader asks 3 questions. Who am I? That's identity. What do I want? That's impact. Why do I want it? That's intent. So as we're working with leaders, we really want to help them unpack their soul, the deepest part of who they are. Who am I? That's identity. What do I want? That's impact, to be fruitful, to be effective. Why do I want it? That's intent. That's intent. So we really want to help a leader unpack that, sit with those 3 questions, because what happens is a leader can confuse identifier, what they do, with who they are. Identifier is the front stage of a leader's life. It's their title, it's what they do, their productivity on the front stage. But it's the backstage, as we said, that matters most and matters more. So that's the S in story. The T in story is transparency. Transparency. That a leader, to lead well, a leader must lead from transparency. A leader must be willing to have others help them process themselves, where they lift up the window shade to their heart and allow safe others to see and to see inside. This is absolutely important. So remember the backstage analogy. Leaders must give access passes to people who've earned the right to be in the backstage. Most of a leader's life will be lived out on the front stage, and most of their relationships, predominantly their relationships, will be front stage relationships. But in the backstage, a leader needs to be able and willing to allow people who've earned the right to be in the backstage. It's like the Marines commercial, a few good men, a few good women. Obviously, as a person of faith, God gets an all access pass to a leader's backstage. But transparency, this is the emotional intelligence of a leader. Over 90% of a leader's effectiveness with grit, with resilience, is based on their emotional intelligence. Over 90%. Leaders who are skilled at emotional intelligence earn more money. 55% of a leader's work, they will need to draw on and draw from their ability to be self-aware and emotionally intelligent. The O in story is optimism. Optimism, that's a mindset deal. Paul says in Philippians 4:8, dwell on those things that are good, that are true, that are lovely, that are pure. Optimism, it's a mindset of getting 1% better. How do you, as a leader, how do you get 1% better? It's a mindset. It's a mindset. It's getting 1% better. 1% better in your communication, 1% better in how you negotiate conflict, 1% better in how you practice wellness, 1% better. So it's optimism. Optimism is having an optimistic mindset as a leader. Absolutely essential. Again, referring back to 2020, this was absolutely critical, that to lead well, how do I continue to have this optimistic mindset? Well, one of the things that I encourage leaders to do to begin to grow in this optimistic mindset, particularly around grit and resilience, is keeping some type of journal. I've been journaling, my gosh, over 30 years. I know some of you thought I was 30 years old. God bless you. But I'm 59. And I've been journaling since I was in my mid 20s. And the research around something like this and how it helps us, particularly around grit and resilience, is journaling gratitude. And when you journal gratitude, you want to get really, really specific, because when you get specific, you get terrific, right? And so I encourage leaders to keep a journal where you identify 3 specific gratitudes. Starting out, maybe 3 times a week you do this. And then have a time to also ask this question: what am I discovering? What am I learning? What do I hear God saying or God showing me? And to spend time reflecting, because research shows out of Harvard that leaders who spend up to 12 to 15 minutes a day over a 10-day period just reflecting on their life, just reflecting on their work, are over 23% more effective. Let me say that again. The research shows that leaders who spend 12 to 15 minutes a day over a 10-day period simply reflecting on their life, reflecting on their work, they have an effectiveness, increased their effectiveness by 23%. Well, guess what? This idea of reflection, and I don't say this at Johns Hopkins, but I can say it to you. But guess what? This is always amazing when research says amen to Scripture, because that's exactly what God does in His work. Every day in the book of Genesis, God creates, God goes to work, and before God checks out for the day, God looks on His work that's reflecting, and He sees that it's good. We want to help leaders reflect on their life, reflect on their work. 1 Timothy 4:16, Paul says it this way: watch your life, pay close attention, persevere in it, for in doing so, you will save both yourself and those you relate to. So this is a tool. The journaling is a tool that I encourage leaders to have and to utilize. Start meetings with talking about wins, WINS, talking about gratitude. Because the other thing with gratitude is a mood booster. Gratitude is attractive to the brain. It begins to stir up the serotonin and dopamine and the pleasure centers in the brain. So gratitude is an incredible resource as we practice having a mindset of optimism and getting better every day. So the R in gratitude is this. The R is rhythm. As I said earlier, in a leader's life, it's no such thing as life-work balance. It's life-work rhythm. It's life-work rhythm. I always push back when I go into organizations who advocate life-work balance, and I say life is not a balance. 2020 again reminded us that life is not a balance. Life is a rhythm. Life is a rhythm. And so the seasons have a rhythm. The ocean has a rhythm. Your heart has a rhythm. The sun has a rhythm. The sun rises, the sun shines, the sun sets. That's a rhythm. And the ocean ebbs and flows. And so that's a rhythm. And so it's important to understand that to embrace grit and resilience is to see life as a rhythm. It's a rhythm. It's a rhythm. And the parts of that rhythm, we talked about reflection. Reflection is a first part. How do we be as leaders, how do we help leaders be intentional about looking at their life every day and looking for the good, mining for the good, and not just keep going? One article said that American businesses are losing up to $600 billion a year because they're distracted and they don't make time for reflection. They don't make time for reflection. We just keep going. We just keep going and looking for the good. One of the gentlemen, Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, who endorsed my Turn the Page book, he actually pays someone every day at 10 o'clock, wherever he is in the world, 10 o'clock p.m. every night, to look on his goals, to look at the questions of who he wants to become and grow and develop in his life. That's what he does. And so that's a part of that reflection process. We want to help leaders as they grow and embrace grit and resilience. How do you make time for reflection? How do you be intentional about reflection? Great leaders don't bump into success and effectiveness and impact. Great leaders are intentional about success, effectiveness, and impact. We don't bump into it. We don't drift to it. It happens intentionally, not automatically. So the rhythm, another part of the rhythm is this, is to refresh. Leaders need self-care. What do you do to refresh? Because with grit and resilience, you need to have deliberate moments to refresh. Jesus models this for us so brilliantly. When we see his life, we see Jesus modeling refreshment in his life. So let's give an example of what you see in his life. Okay. In Mark chapter 1, 30 to 31 to 35, on the front stage of his life, Jesus is healing like the whole town. I mean, when Jesus comes to town, you're going to get free Medicare and you're going to get a free meal. So everyone's trying to get in that line, right? So Jesus is in town and he's doing that. He's casting out demons. He heals Peter's mother-in-law. That's verses 31 to 34. That's a pretty demanding front stage day and productivity. But listen to what he does in verse 35. In verse 35, Jesus, it says, while it was yet dark and early, he departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. That's a whole session just around self-care, wellness, sustaining your effectiveness as you sustain yourself. And then it says in Luke 5:16, he often departed to the wilderness, to a solitary place, the oceans, the mountains, the wilderness, to practice self-care, to pray, to center, to go back to the core. So leaders need this. As leaders, this is all part of the rhythm. And the third part, so is reflect is a part of that rhythm. Refresh is a part of that rhythm. And recentering is a part of that rhythm, to recenter. So what does that mean? To recenter requires that a leader is always coming back to their core values. Because when we talk about grit, when we talk about resilience, it's important that we are going back to our core values because life knocks us off center. Even as the song we sing, Come Thou Fount, there's a stanza in that song that says, prone to wander, God, I feel it, prone to wander from the God I love. And so it's important that we come back to our core values. Revelation chapter 2, verse 4 and 5 says, you left your first love. Return to your first love, your core values, your core values. So it's important that with this rhythm, there's intentional moments to reflect, to refresh, and to recenter, and to help leaders understand this important rhythm that they need to be impactful on the front stage. Everything that we're saying so far, with S being soul, who am I? What do I want? Why do I want it? T, transparency, because with transparency, if whatever a leader doesn't talk out, they will act out or they bury it alive. The O being optimism and the R being rhythm. That what happens on the backstage governs, empowers, sustains the leader's life on the front stage. So we need this. And then the Y is all around yielding to a cause greater than yourself, which is a big part of grit, by the way. Grit is always looking at a cause that's greater than myself, a cause that's greater than myself. So it's yielding to a cause that's greater than myself. That's daily surrender as a man of faith, as a woman of faith. So how do we help leaders understand and embrace that every day they are to surrender their agenda? I oftentimes will say it this way. When a leader promotes God's agenda, God promotes the leader. When a leader promotes their own agenda, they are on their own. Let me say it again. When a leader promotes God's agenda, God promotes the leader. When a leader promotes their own agenda, they are on their own. It's when we humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, he will exalt you. And so yielding to a cause, yielding to a purpose, yielding to a vision, yielding to a mission that's greater than yourself is absolutely critical to be impactful on the front stage of life, the front stage as you walk in grit and resilience. Because grit and resilience, so what are we talking about? We talk about this, this idea of grit. We've been alluding to it. Let's now unpack that. So what is grit? Grit is having passion and perseverance over a long period of time. Grit is having passion and perseverance over a long period of time. It's stick-to-itiveness. It's being able to stay with a difficult, challenging task or experience. So you can see now, grit is truly what happens in the backstage. It's a heart matter. It's a virtue. It's one of the predictors of success, not the only predictor of success, but grit is absolutely essential. How do you have passion and perseverance over a long period of time? Every leader needs this to lead well. Every leader who's married needs this to love well and to live well. And so grit is essential for is one of the predictors of success in a leader's life. So again, what is it? It's having passion and perseverance over a long period of time. Over a long period of time. Over a long period of time. In 2020, I got a call from a CEO in the women's fashion industry. Many of the women that are watching, you probably have this designer's clothes. My wife certainly does. My mother does. My sister does, because she's that popular and I guess famous. And so I was surprised. She found me on LinkedIn and she went to my website and set up a time for a consultation, which I do with leaders and CEOs. And we had a consultation. And I could see, because it was on Zoom, I could see the grief. I could see the sense of mourning, which, by the way, we have to mourn well to move on. We have to mourn to move on. We have to process. And I really believe that even with grit, mourning is part of the process in order to embrace grit well. The proverb says it this way, Proverbs 30 verse 5, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. So guess what? We have to go through the mourning, mourning, to get to the morning, morning. Did you get that? We have to go through the morning, morning, to get to the morning, morning. And it takes grit to get to the morning, the new day, the new experience, the breakthrough. So this leader calls, and I could see the grief and the mourning on her face. And we just began to talk about it. She just said, everything in my industry is been disrupted. Yeah, no secret there. Everything in my industry has been disrupted. And I could see she wanted to talk. She wanted to be able to be transparent. She allowed me access to her backstage. She began to get really transparent, began to share things around her soul and the grief and the pain and the emotional stress of the moment. And as we did that, I was able to help her understand and embrace some thoughts around resilience. So what is resilience? Resilience and grit are like peanut butter and jelly. They go hand in hand. Resilience is when we have a setback, yet we bounce back better, wiser, stronger. Okay? So what is resilience? When we have a setback, yet we bounce back better, wiser, stronger. And that's what my conversation with this CEO in the women's fashion industry. We talked about that, what the opportunity was, and we'll unpack more of that when we talk about Rise. So grit. How do you grow in grit? How do you embrace grit? How do you embrace resiliency? So with grit, it starts with intrigue and curiosity about something. When you start to think about grit starts with you're curious, you're intrigued. Even as I got to teach positive psychology through my journaling, a lot of things rise to the surface and become clear for me. And I began to realize and became curious and thinking, you know what? If you put like you put seeds in the ground and rain happens, it gets watered, and sun happens, that seeds grow, things flourish. And I said, that's amazing to me. I mean, nothing, not, it's brilliant, but it's not a new concept. But to me, I became intrigued and curious. I said, you know what, if that's true for plants or for flowers, what would that look like in life? That if the right environment was cultivated, would people grow? What's the right environment? So I began to realize and think about things like, if you create a culture of appreciation and gratitude, and you see these words in scripture, people's hearts move towards that. People's hearts move towards that. Empathy, for example. I can remember my wife and I, again, we're celebrating, oh my gosh, 32 years of marriage. And so we're in that 30s decade in terms of marital love. And I can remember a moment when we had an intense moment of fellowship, a growth session. In 32 years, you have a lot of those, right? But I asked her this question: honey, what do you want me to hear that I'm not hearing? And I listened. And she shared with me, and breakthrough happened. Okay. You may say, okay, what does that have to do with empathy, with grit and resilience? It's because it's part of that. When you create the environment, the heart grows. There was empathy. Psalm 116:1 says it this way: I love the Lord because he heard my cry and inclined to me. And what I realize is this: when we feel loved, it's because we felt heard. And when we feel heard, it causes us to feel love. Let me say that again. When we feel love, oftentimes it's because we felt heard. And when we feel heard, it causes us to feel love. It's empathy. Dr. King said it this way: a riot is the language of the unheard. So that's all intriguing to me, because I realize that's universal. that if you create the right environment for people to feel heard, if you create the right environment for a leader to feel heard, empathy happens. As a leader creates an environment for their team to feel heard. As a leader creates an environment for their family to feel heard. Do you see how that works? That's all ubiquitous. That's all universal. That we at the core, in our humanity, we were created for empathy. We were created to be heard, feel valued. All of that tied into grit for me. I didn't have the word grit at the time, but I was just curious. I said, if that's true, what else is true in terms of virtues? That if you apply these virtues, flourishing happens, which is one of the key words in positive psychology, is flourishing. And it's a biblical word. Psalm 52:8 talks about that we experience flourishing when we're in God's presence. There's a flourishing spiritual, emotional, relational, mental, physical, as we care for our bodies. So with grit, there's intrigue and curiosity. And for me, I got into the field of positive psychology and working with leaders because I was intrigued. I was curious. Another part of grit and growing in grit is having gritty friends, a supporting cast, people who are also gritty and they share in your curiosity. So that helps you're able to be iron sharpening iron to each other. So with grit, you want to be surrounded. In some businesses, they have a mastermind where people have goals and dreams, and they're able to grow their life. They're able to grow their businesses through that gritty relationship of iron sharpening iron. A third piece of grit is having a growth mindset. Carol Dweck is a professor at Stanford University. She's done a lot of work around the growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset it's more like a victim, self-pity. I'm stuck in this narrative. I'm stuck in this story. There's a lot of blame. There's a lot of self-pity. And so it's a fixed mindset that the cards that I've been dealt, what I have, and there's nothing I can do about it. That's more of a fixed mindset. Where Carol Dweck says that a growth mindset embraces growth, embraces continuous improvement, always wanting to get better. That goes back to that 1% mindset, optimism. How do I get better? How do I help how do I show up in this leader's life and help the leader grow and get better? What are the leader's goals? How do as I earn the right to be in their backstage, how do I help them grow and become who they say they want to become? It's having a growth mindset spiritually, a growth mindset physically in your body, in your wellness, a growth mindset emotionally, a growth mindset in relationships, a growth mindset with finances, your mental acumen. So it's having a growth mindset, absolutely fundamental here in terms of the leader and with grit. So that's how you begin to grow in grit. Again, we're defining grit as having passion and perseverance over a long period of time. Passion and perseverance over a long period. And resilience is when we have a setback, but we bounce back from a setback better, wiser, and stronger. And so we need both. It's peanut butter and jelly. It goes together. We have to have it, and leaders need it. And these are backstage virtues. Grit and resilience are backstage virtues that we need to show up on the front stage effective, and it sustains how we show up on the front stage. So here's a tool that I created to help you as you help leaders embrace this embrace grit and embrace resilience. I call it Rise. I saw with all the cancel culture and the shaming on social media and the anger, people weren't listening and to each other. And this is that's just the people of faith, you know. I wish that wasn't the case, but just the whole world. But just again, perhaps a bit surprised, or maybe I shouldn't have been so surprised about how the pandemic really brought out a lot of anger. And a lot of rejection, a lot of cancel culture and shame. So I created this resource called Rise. How can we begin to be optimistic? Whenever we're going into a new year, everyone gets excited and we're ready to turn the page on 2020. And so there's excitement. We go into a new year, new me, new possibilities. So I created this tool, Rise. So Rise is these 4 quadrants. The R is robust. The I is impact. The S is seek. And the E is effect. So let's walk through each of these quadrants. And by the way, you can download this. Go ahead and download this. You can have this. And I created 2 versions, one for the faith-based community and one for the corporate community that you can take to work. So, and you can download it at johnnyparker.com, Rise Faith. That's for the faith community. johnnyparker.com, johnnyparker.com/Rise Faith. Okay. And then to take it to work in the corporate community, is johnnyparker.com/Rise. That's simple. So let's look at these 4 quadrants, and this is shaped in grit and resilience. So the R in Rise is robust. God's word tells us God has given all of us gifts. He's given all of us strengths and talents. Some have 1, some have 2, some have 5. You're either a 1 talent person, 2 talent person, 5 talent person. But God's given us all strengths. Robust is your strengths. David, when he meets King Saul and the whole battle preceding the battle with Goliath, King Saul says, okay, let's equip you. You're going to need some strength, right? So David, respectfully, I believe, tried on King Saul's armor, and it was clunky. He said, this is not me. This is not who I am. This is not my strength. And David takes off the armor and says, I'm a slinger. Okay. And it was like, it wasn't the slingshot that we had where you pull back and no, he was running towards Goliath and he was getting revolutions, and he released that. And he said that rock was heading at Goliath's head like a 90 miles per hour fastball. With a head that big, he said, there's no way I'm going to miss it. So David was operating in his strength. When you're operating in your strength, you are operating in a way that's near perfect. Okay? You're nearly perfect when you're operating your strength. And it's your strength because 3 E's, E, E, E. When you're operating your strength, ease, it's easy. It feels easy. It's natural. The slinger work was more natural to David than the armor. So it's easy. You're at ease when you're operating your strength. The second E is effective. When you're operating your strength, you're effective at what you're doing. The third E is enthusiastic. When you're operating your strength, you're passionate about what you're doing. It goes back to passion again. Grit, passion, and perseverance over a long period of time. So David was doing that. David was operating in his strength. So here's the question. What are your strengths? What are your strengths? And how can you show up in your strengths in a more consistent way? That's the question in quadrant and robust. Here's another resource I want to give you that I give my students at Johns Hopkins. You want to go to the website viacharacter.org. viacharacter.org. VIA stands for Virtues in Action. VIA character.org. And what it's going to give you are 20, and it's free. It's free 99. So there you go. And it's going to give you 24 strengths. For first 5 are the strongest of the 24 strengths. The first 5. Everything can't be in your first 5. So, and then if you have a teenager, have a teen version that you can offer to your teenager if you work with teens. So there you go, viacharacter.org, and download that, do it. Takes about 10, 12 minutes. It's going to be a great, great resource for you. So that's your strengths. So you're able to do that. Look at that. And you know what? As you work with leaders, give this to the leader that you're coaching. Have him, have her, have them take it. I do that all the time. I give them this tool. There's another one that's more robust, and they have to pay for that one. But it's Strength Finders 2.0. Some of you may be familiar with that. But that's an opportunity to help them see their strengths, their passions, their strengths. So that's the R. It's robust. The I in RISE is impact. What's the impact? Again, the word of God in Philippians says, Paul writes these words, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. What's the impact? What's the impact? And so the question in this quadrant, what is now possible? What's the unique opportunity that I have? What is now possible? As you are thinking about grit and resilience, what's now possible? What's the unique opportunity? Going back to the CEO in the fashion design industry with women, I asked that question, what is now possible? And one of the things that she said was this, I could now think of designing clothes with positivity in mind, women's clothes, based on what's happening. I also said to her this, what would it look like to have a mindset of really moving from water ski to scuba diving in terms of leaving your team better off than how you found them? And then as you do that with your team, how might your team, as you design women apparel, leave the design of clothing for women with the mindset of leaving women better off than how you find them? You see how that works? So, and by the way, I would encourage you to first do the RISE tool by yourself first. Just get familiar with it. And also there's a team version. You can do this as a team, as a ministry team or team at work or as a family. And you can go through this tool. So that's the impact. What's the unique opportunity? What is now possible? Remember the statement I made earlier that God allows the hard stuff to become some of your best stuff, and it becomes great stuff to serve the world. That's what we're talking about. The S is seek. 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 What do I need, or what do I want to stop doing, start doing, or continue doing? What do you need? What do I need to stop doing, start doing, or continue doing? Okay. What is that? Who do I want to become? What do I want to grow in? Who do I want to become in terms of my heart on the backstage? Not what I want to do on the front stage, but who do I want to become more of in terms of virtues and character development in and on my backstage? Okay. What do I need to stop, start, or continue doing? Who do I want to become? Again, 1 Timothy 4:16, Paul says it this way, watch your life and your doctrine. Persevere in it. Pay close attention to it, because in doing so, everyone wins. You win and those you work with. Leaders win. I tell leaders, healthy me, strong we. Healthy me. And biblical health is all around humility and owning your life. Owning your life. Owning your story. owning your life, owning your story. That's the S, is seek. Watch your life. Who do you want to become? What do you need to stop, start, or continue doing? Again, with the grit, persevering, passion and perseverance over a long period of time. With resilience, how do I continue to bounce back? Wiser, better, stronger. And then the E is effect. Ephesians 3:20, Paul writes these words, "Now unto him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that I can ask or imagine, according to the power that works in me." So now the E effect is a backcasting coaching tool that you can use with as you coach leaders. So what is it? So this is an imaginative exercise. That's why I like Ephesians 3:20. God gives us permission to imagine the work he is doing in us and through us and in the future. So imagine. And I tell this is exercise. It's with the effect. It goes something like this. Write a letter to someone near and dear in your life. And imagine fulfilling and bringing fruit and impact as you write this letter. So for example, whenever I've done this, my wife and I have done this together and apart, I'll write one to my grandfather who's with the Lord. And I'll say, "Dear Grandpa," and I'll just imagine being fruitful, effective, and impactful for the glory of God and in different parts of the world, in my life, in my marriage, with my sons, in every core area of my life. So I'll write a letter and I'll write it 3 years out, 5 years out, sometimes 7 or 10 years out. And I'll write it from the perspective of having achieved it. It's kind of like you reverse engineering it. We scored the touchdown. What did I do? What did we do as a team to score? That's what you're doing with something like this. And I want to make it clear. This is not name it, claim it, blab it, grab it. This is only imagining. And what happens when you do something like this, your brain gets in gear. You may not hit the moon, but you land somewhere amongst the stars. So it gets the faith juices bubbling when you do an exercise like this. So I want to give you some permission to do an exercise like this. That's effect. Now unto him who is able to do and God's always going to do exceedingly abundantly beyond what you can ask or imagine. So it's freedom to imagine. Engage the Holy Spirit as you do this and as you perhaps offer this exercise with working with a coach. So that's the robust, that's the RISE tool. R, robust, it's all around your strengths. The I is impact. The S is seek. And the E is effect. Again, I want to encourage you first, do this yourself so you can get familiar with it, acquainted with it, and comfortable, but then offer it as part of your resource as you work with a leader. You can do this with a team. There's a team version, there's a personal version, and again, there's the corporate version, and there's the faith-based version. Highly encourage you to use this. This is shaped and influenced and a great tool to help grow a leader and your own life in grit and resilience. Again, you can download it at johnnyparker.com/Rise Faith for the faith-based community, or simply Rise for the secular corporate community. Great. So as we come to a close here, I always like to encourage leaders with the statement that I wrote in my Turn the Page book, and encourage you with this, that leadership, coaching can sometimes be hard work, that leadership and coaching is hard work. Leadership and coaching is worth the work. And with God, with Christ, you can do the work. God bless you.